How hard should your tyres really be? And what is the right pressure? The first point, if we're starting completely from scratch, is to make sure that you pump up your tyres to within the minimum and the maximum recommended pressure that's normally printed on the side of the tyre there. Now this Continental, has a maximum recommended pressure only. That's 8.5 bar or 120 PSI. So if you stick close to that, then you will not go wrong from a safety perspective at least. If you don't have a cycling specific pump with a pressure gauge on it, my first suggestion would be to go and buy one. But in the short term, what 100 PSI feels like is actually when you squeeze the side of the tyre, so not the tread, but the side, basically you can squeeze as hard as you can with your thumbs and it will not move very much. Ambiguous, I know, but you haven't got a pressure gauge. So what can you do? Well, now we're safe. That is a very good place to start, but it's certainly not the only thing to think about. We also need to factor in the width of our tyres and also our body weight as well, because narrower tyres need higher pressures than wider ones, and heavier riders need higher pressures than lighter ones. And then just to complicate things further, we also need to factor in the following points as well. Tyres need to grip. That's pretty obvious if you want to accelerate or change direction or indeed slow down. But a tyre that's too hard won't deform to the road surface, and so less rubber will be in contact with the road at any one time, meaning that you have much less grip. So ideally you want to run a pressure that allows the tyre to compress when you sit on the bike. Now, believe it or not, loads and loads of research has been done into exactly this topic. And most people, it would seem, agree with the work of a man called Frank Berto from back in the 80s. And he worked out that the ideal amount of compression was 15% of the tyre's total height. Although, admittedly, that is a remarkably difficult thing to measure. Brilliantly, comfortable tyre pressures can also be faster tyre pressures as well, because for just about all of cycling eternity, we thought that harder tyres were faster tyres. And with good reason, to be fair, because in laboratory settings, harder tyres were measurably much faster, so they rolled with much less resistance than softer tyres. However, out in the real world, on normal bumpy roads, a softer tyre absorbs vibration much better, and that vibration really slows you down. A lot, in fact. So that is why a softer, more comfortable tyre can potentially roll faster as well. If it's starting to sound like softer tyres are the way to go, then hold on, because a tyre that is too soft will start to roll slower, and then they will also squirm around corners, which makes it particularly difficult to control and, dare I say, dangerous. And then also, of course, a softer tyre will be more susceptible to impact punctures. I'm sure you'll have noticed that I haven't actually recommended any tyre pressures yet, so perhaps it is time for me to put my money where my mouth is. Okay, I weigh 73 kilograms, and when I use a 23C wide tyre, I put 95 PSI in my front wheel and 100 PSI in the back, because there's a little bit more weight over there. Then for 25s, I use 80 and 85 PSI, and then for 28s, I run 60 and 65 PSI. As I mentioned earlier, if you are a little bit lighter, you will want to run less. So consider putting in about 1 PSI less for every 1 kilogram of body weight. And if you're heavier, you want to do the opposite. And if you're working in bar, then that's probably about 1 bar per 25 kilograms of body weight that's different. Now, there are loads of really handy calculators out there on the internet that will attempt to do this job for you. But if there is one thing that I think you should take from this video, it's that you should spend time thinking about what your own perfect tyre pressure is, because it does vary from rider to rider and indeed from place to place. So think about the things that we've just covered in this video. Does the tyre squirm when it gets too soft? Or indeed, are you really susceptible to pinch flats? Or are you about to go for a ride on the best, most super smooth tarmac in the entire world? In which case you probably want to put a few extra PSI in. Do not be afraid to play around. Stay within the limits and stay safe. Oh, and there is also one thing. It's not just your tyre that will have pressure limits on. If you've got a really lightweight set of wheels on, then they too may have a pressure limit. Although, if they're anything like these zips here, we've actually seen them being inflated to over 200 PSI more than the recommended limit. Whoa, Well, clearly a little bit of margin for error built in there. Now, do make sure you subscribe to GCN. Very simple, and it's free. To do it, just click on the globe. And if you're after some more content about tyres, in fact, then why not click up there, and we've got a video about how to reduce the risk of punctures. Or just down there, we've got a very topical one, the truth about wide rims and wide tyres. Check them out.